Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Laura O'Brien and Jon O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
Did magic still exist during the Ulster Cycle of Ireland's mythology? Well, Dag the Eve agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. And the answer, not hard to say, yes, it definitely still did. Now, when many people think about the Ulster Cycle, a lot of the people think about the main saga or main story that exists within it, known as the Táin Bó Cuailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley. But there are a lot of other stories in the Ulster Cycle as well, many of them also being other types of Táin Bó Cuailnge, Táin Bó Fliais, there's a number of other cattle raids, as well as a number of other stories about the birth, death, boyhood deeds of various heroes or main characters that exist within the Ulster Cycle. But for a lot of people, they focus on the martial aspects, the champions, the warrior feats, all of the main conflicts, the last stands of heroes, the battles between all of the men of Ireland and the men of Ulster, etc. But there is a significant amount of magic that is still happening within that time frame and within that cycle. As we kind of look at the four main cycles of our stories, we have the mythological cycle, which generally deals with the deities, the Tuatha Dé Danann, etc. After which we have the Ulster Cycle. So it's not very far away from the time of gods in Ireland. Following the Ulster Cycle, we have the Fenian Cycle. We still have some magical elements. We still have references and stories to Angus Mac Oak, the young son, getting involved and taking care of people who are linked with him. So there are still some magical elements around the time of the Fenian Cycle, but it is slightly less so. And by the time we get to the last cycle, the Cycle of Kings, though there is mention of otherworld aspects and lineages or descendancies from members of the Tuatha Dé Danann, we're kind of squarely more towards historical glossaries and lists of figures of kings within Ireland, as opposed to the mythical, magical narratives. So the Ulster Cycle is very much full of magic. And there are a number of different types of magic that we see, from the battle prophecies of the Morrígan, for example, and also Fidelma, a prophetess who actually talks about there being, comes across Maeve as she's preparing stuff, and Fidelma's like, yeah, I'm the prophetess of Connacht, and pretty much I see all of the warriors covered in crimson and gore. And so there's a lot of prophecy that is actually happening, but there's also cursing magic, in that there's very famously, there's the cursing of the Morrigan against Cuchulain, where he's acting like an asshole, and she, in various guises, promises to come against him. She curses him that she will stand over his doom at the end of his time. But we also then see the other aspect of her power in shapeshifting. So in her curse, she promises how she'll come against him, and then later on in the story, she shapeshifts into a heifer to drive cattle, a she-wolf to bite at him, and an eel within the rivers. But she's not the only one shapeshifting in that story. Earlier on in the Ulster Cycle, Dexter, the mother of Setanta MacSultum, who will become Cuchulain, is herself shapeshifted into a bird. Her and 50 maidens of Macha are shapeshifted into otherworld birds. So there's a lot of different things that happen, as well as, now I know I'm speeding down through these different types of magic because there's one that I'm a personal fan of, and I have an example of it that I really want to read out to you. But throughout the Ulster Cycle, it is steeped in magic. There is otherworld influences all the time. We have deity-based circumstances with the Morrigan, Dagda, etc. But then there are magical feats that are performed by non-deity individuals. And that's where we get to one of my personal favorites that I came across in the Lord, bardic power. So we see it time and again in various ways that bards have the power to kind of define or alter or shift or shape reality by how they recite against it. So they're said to have two forms of speaking. There is mulla agus air, as in mulla, which is satire, and air, which is praise poetry. I think I have them right this time, but it is satire and praise. So it's this rough, take down speaking, and then also this smooth raising up and lifting up speaking. And so those aspects do, even within the legal structures, shift and change people's position within the very strict caste society that was ancient Ireland. But one of the other great things, and this is the example that I really wanted to share, is when bards have a sufficient amount of knowledge and a sufficient amount of power, this definition by recitation can really alter and shape not just themselves or not just their own story, but the literal landscape of the island. And so there is a particular bard who is mentioned, and I have the excerpt of what happens here. His name is Aed Mac Anine, and Aed Mac Anine cohabited with Morrígan the Furzy Hair. She was the wife of Concover, Concover this king in Ulster. Aed was the poet of Concover. They were found out. Cohabiting means that they were getting it on. They were having a tryst. So they were found out. Then the poet was seized by Concover's command, and the poet asked that his death might be drowning. And Concover granted him that. So, of course, at this point, you're like, okay, why would the bard ask specifically that he be drowned to death? It seems a bit rough, but whereupon Aed was taken out to be drowned to every lake in Ireland, and he would sing a spell upon the water so that it ebbed away until there was not a drop in it, so that there was not in Ireland any river or lake that would drown him. Now, if that is not absolute epic play and absolute epic setup, he's like, oh, well, if you're going to kill me, I'd like to be drowned, please. Knowing all the while that he has the knowledge of all the rivers and all the lakes, and he can, by his power, cause the waters to go away from him, which means that no matter where they go in Ireland to try and drown him, they literally can't. So it does come to a sad end for not actually Aed. Unfortunately, this story comes from the death of Lair Búideach, Lair Búideach being one of the heroes of Ulster. So, of course, there's Cuchulain, Conall Cernach, and Lair Búideach. So they're the three rivals, the great rivals in Ulster. And the story ends with Lair Búideach because as these guys having gone all around Ireland trying to drown Aed, and Aed being like, well, there's not a river or lake. They find one more lake, and it is a lake outside Lair Búideach's house. And before he can actually cast a spell on it, the guys grab him, bind him, so he can't actually speak his words, and they begin to try and drown him. Of course, Lair Búideach comes out and he's like, who the fuck is this? Drowning three guys, drowning one guy in a lake. This is none. And so, being a warrior and a self-styled hero as well, he wades in to try and stop that happening, and it does result in his own demise. But again, how crafty and how like smart would you need to be to define your own death, knowing that you can get out of it by use of your own magical power? So there are many other types of magical power as we see in the Ulster Cycle. I've mentioned a couple of them before. There's also the warrior feats, some of which could be considered magical in their nature, being able to run across the tops of spears, being able to give cries and shouts that would cause animals and beasts and cattle nearby to give more milk. And it's a fascinating one. One guy gives a bellow every morning. He's told to go up onto the the walkways or the defenses, the walls, and from there to give his warrior bellow. And so he would give this magical cry, and then anyone within the area who would hear would have their valor inspired and increased, but also cattle and animals would give two-thirds extra milk. So yeah, there's one other thing that we can't really ignore, and it is the idea of geis, also pronounced as gyasa, which is a magical prohibition or restriction that is placed on an individual. Usually these work in correlation or connection to how powerful that individual is. It's almost like this kind of pressure cooker stopgap so that the person doesn't become too powerful, so that there's always this vulnerability, this weakness, this aspect where, and it's not that it's their kryptonite, like Superman style. It is the fact that it is an onus or a responsibility that is put upon them, that should they choose to go against, or should they be put in a position where they violate this geis, then all of their ability, their power, and in many cases, their life comes to an end. And we see multiple geis during the Ulster Cycle, and I think maybe if there's interest in me talking about geis or gyasa, let me know in the comments. But I do teach a full class. There's a full class in the Irish Pagan School on specifically the magic of the Ulster Cycle. I pull out a whole other number of examples from various texts, various stories, and talk through, and then talk about a little bit like if we understand the narratives of how the magic was used, can we get a better understanding of where that might influence or inspire us in our own practices there today? So I'll pop a link to the class down below. If you're interested, go check that out. And as ever, look after yourself, take care, and slán. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.